Whenever one of the games in a weird, niche subgenre that I engage with relative frequency becomes popular enough to exceed every expectation, I don't know how I feel about it. Of course, I feel a certain happiness that something I spent my time in and gave effort to has found recognition that I think it deserves. But I don't know how to critique those sorts of examples. Do I look at it within that genre's expectations? Do I compare it to similar games in gameplay or similar games in popularity? Baldur's Gate 3 was, and still is, incredible. Even if I didn't get around to finishing it yet, I didn't find a game like Trinity or Divinity Original Sin 2 any less incredible, making me feel happy. But surprised at the surge of popularity of a game like Baldur's Gate 3 that is much beyond that genre's expectations of popularity. I feel similarly about Schedule 1. It is a great example of its genre and provides good entertainment for what it's worth. But as I'll explain in more detail, I didn't find anything spectacularly different or better it did compared to other games in its subgenre. Schedule 1 is at its core a tycoon game, or the type of game where there is a word simulator at the end of its name, even if they are not technically simulators, a kind of game where you build an empire of whatever the game is structured around, with many hiccups and lessons along the way. What you expect from this sort of gameplay are nice mechanics to play around with, variety, and a sense of accomplishment that comes from becoming richer and optimizing the mechanics that get you there. For this game, all the mechanics are sorted around making and selling drugs. You start the game with a nice prologue that lays out the very simple story that the game has, and also shows you the ropes around how the mechanics of the game function. You start with growing weed and selling it. After the short prologue section, you enter the city where you will be spending the entirety of your playtime. After the RV given to you gets blown up by a local cartel, you go and rent a motel room and start your growing business there. You get to grow your supply and sell it by advertising it via your phone and send it to people who message you. You get to haggle on the price and amount, choose the time you want to sell it, and so on. You will also unlock dealers who take a cut from your profits and sell it for you. You can slowly unlock new things as you level up, as well as new clients, dealers, suppliers, who will sell you seeds and so on, for it to actually grow the product you will be selling. Currently, there are 3 drugs in the game you can make: weed, meth, and cocaine. The game does not have too much variety on the type of drug, but the variety comes from mixing the product you have cultivated with different items to create new effects. The effects you create by mixing different ingredients will make your product more expensive, making you more profitable as a result. The effects can also be seen with people you sell the product to, or if you decide to use it yourself. From effects that enlarge your head or your head catching fire, that can be fun to be found in experimenting with this mechanic. The map is small, and everyone you see is a customer to be, or a cop. You can buy a variety of buildings that will get increasingly bigger as they become more expensive, so you can take your operation to the next level. You also have to deposit your earnings, but have a weekly limit. So you will have to buy businesses to launder your money. The main cycle of the game is days. You get orders as the day progresses, you complete those orders, grow new products, go to sleep, and start a new day. There are also some other things you can buy, like jewelry, clothes, and tattoos. And there is even a casino to waste away all your earnings. Let's start with how I feel about the whole thing. At its core, the game does not stray away from the genre, and what it does with its mechanics is a great example of why these types of games can be so addicting to play. However, the content well dries up pretty quickly with this one. After at most 8 hours of gameplay, you are all on your own. There is no new story beats and no new mechanics except unlocking cocaine leveling up. The cycle of the game of making the product and selling it is almost never interrupted by new things to play around with, or surprising gameplay or story. Basically, when you oil the machine well enough so it runs as smoothly as possible, developers usually bring a new cog into the machine to make you work for efficiency again. Usually, the reward for this is that once you smooth out the new kink, your machine runs even better. Here, when you solve the problems around supplying and selling, the cycle never changes, and you do the same thing but bigger every day of the game. There is basically no story, which is what you expect from a game like this, but a story running in the background can keep a game like this engaging as well. There is the hint of a cartel in the city, but not really a hint. You hear about them when they blow up the RV that you use in the prologue of the game. So, I thought as I grew my business, I might run into some members of that cartel, or they may become more aggressive to my presence in the city as the game went on. But no, the cartel is nowhere to be found after their first mention. There are guns, and even though wonky and cartoony, there is even a combat system as well. However, it is not utilized in the slightest. Other than a lack of engaging content throughout the runtime, the main cycle of growing, mixing your product with stuff you buy at the gas station, can become pretty engaging and addictive for some hours. The upgrades you buy in terms of new places, businesses, tools, hiring people, or buying new material can keep your wallet pretty empty for a while. You make a profit, and you almost always need that money to make even more profit in the future. It is a good cycle that grinds to a halt at the end game as you make more money than you know what to do with. There are cosmetic stuff and cars, which could also be considered cosmetic due to the fact that the map is so small and combined with roadblocks where the cops search your vehicle. I didn't find any reason to actually drive a car, rather just zoom around with my golden skateboard, which is fun to play around with but janky as all hell. The bugs rear their head once in a while too, but for a game in this genre, you can basically call it spotless in terms of bugs. The genre is riddled with bug-ridden simulators where you will fight the bugs more than the game mechanics most of the time. For Schedule 1, the bugs are humorous more than anything, and I didn't find any bugs too annoying in my time playing. The cartoon-like visual style eliminates the seriousness of the game too, in a good way. I can't really finish the review without mentioning Drug Dealer Simulator as well. I'm not gonna get into controversies, which I really don't care about. However, the similarities are there between the two games, but if the similarity is that both are simulator games where you sell drugs, it is not enough to diminish any points from Schedule 1. Having played both games, I have to agree that Schedule 1 does everything better than the other game. And if the similarities between the games are enough for a lawsuit, any game in the simulator genre can start suing each other, I guess. So, what do I think of the game? Looking at it from one angle, I dislike the lack of content, lack of any engaging breaks in the gameplay cycle, and overall, something enjoyable to look forward to. A game like Contraband Police does what I'm talking about here incredibly, where there are pauses in the main cycle of gameplay in terms of attacks to the border, secret night missions, decisions to make, and so on, that the game stays fresh much longer. However, I can't deny that for up to 8 to 10 hours, the gameplay cycle of Schedule 1 stayed incredibly engaging, and I looked forward to coming home from my 9 to 5 to do my 5 to 9 in Schedule 1 for a few days. I also cannot deny the potential. The game is in early access, and I am not one to cut any slack to games for their shortcomings because of the potential of those shortcomings being fixed in the future, and the score will reflect that. But I believe with the frequency of updates and so on, playing Schedule 1 in a few years may be a completely different experience, and hopefully a lot more engaging one than playing it now. Even so, reaching unheard of numbers in the genre with its surge in popularity, Schedule 1 is a good ambassador for its genre, considering most of what the genre represents are Unity SF flip looking games that, once you get into them, you realize there's an addictive and well thought out gameplay cycle within it. The game does not reach the peaks of games like My Summer Car, but it is a good starting point that I will watch closely to see how it develops through its early access process.